Hi everyone, welcome to the Hot Seat. I'm Ron Klopfanstein, and this is a Media Monday. In a moment, we're going to be talking to Eric Santomauro-Stenzel. He is the editor-in-chief of the Monitor at Hamilton College. It's a student publication, and we'll talk to him about his work and his journalism. But first, here's some headlines happening in the world of news and entertainment and arts and culture right here in the Mohawk Valley. Saturday is Free Comic Book Day, so you will want to go celebrate that with Ravenswood Comics on Seneca Turnpike in New Hartford. They will have free comic books available to readers of all ages, and they're going to have sales, snacks, and giveaways throughout the day. We're going to have a phone call from Al from Ravenswood Comics at 5:38. So in the third segment, we're going to hear a little bit more about what Free Comic Book Day is all about. But also this week, there's a lot of great events that are going to be happening at the Kirkland Arts Center and at MVCC. You can meet Charlie from Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. The original actor who played Charlie Bucket. He's all grown up now. And I have more on all these events at uticaphoenix.net/Media Monday. So, Eric Santomauro-Stenzel, you are the editor-in-chief of the Monitor, and the Monitor is different. It's not actually the official student newspaper of your college. What is it, and how do you characterize it?
Sure, it's wonderful to be here first. Thank you for having me on.
Thanks for being here. I've been a fan of your work for a long time, so it's great to talk to you in person. We've actually covered stories here. We'll talk about that later on in the show, but
Sure.
Great to have you here. So tell me about your journalism and your paper and what you're doing.
Yeah, I think part of how I describe the Monitor, as I was just saying off there, is it fills a similar niche to the Utica Phoenix. We cover social justice issues on our campus. From time to time, if we can, we try to do some stuff off campus. But we do the range of news, opinion, features, interviews, and we've also often served as a platform for student advocates, community advocates, to get what they're asking for out into the publication. So we take kind of an investigative bent very often, uncovering wrongdoing, also putting a spotlight onto the advocates that are in our community. And I think over the last few years we've grown quite a bit, grown our staff, grown our readership, just went back into print on campus for the first time since before the pandemic
Nice.
this semester. And I think what brings me to the Monitor and brings so many staff to the Monitor is the ability to be a part of a publication that isn't just about talking about what's happening, but talking about solutions, how people can get engaged, uncovering where things have room for improvement in our community, and then tracing that through the series of events, pushing for improvement, pushing for more transparency, inclusion in decision making, and stuff like that.
It definitely has a lot more depth. And I also think that the stories that you publish have more of seriousness and are willing to take a more critical look at the campus itself, whereas the college paper probably doesn't really do that so much.
Yeah, and I'll be nice to my colleagues. They put plenty of.
They do good work too.
Yes,
but there's also a place for somebody who sees themselves as a bit outside of things,
Sure.
and is willing to take the critical look at the institution.
Sure, and I think the Monitor, part of the reason why the Monitor has grown so much over the past few years is because people have really felt a gap in some of the coverage that was existing on campus prior. Being willing to take a more critical look at decisions that are made, not just trusting what an administrator says as automatically being true, fact-checking it, right? And talking about, well, what are the concerns that student advocates have? So we're really trying to broaden the diversity of perspectives that are included in our campus media discourse. And I think we've seen that there's a real appetite for that on our campus.
It's being read
resonating.
like outside of campus too. I mean, I was very aware of this even before I knew you and before I was too involved in media myself with this paper. I was reading your website. What is the website address, by the way?
HamiltonMonitor.com.
Great. And then I'll have all those links to all this
Sure.
in the show notes and stuff. And, I think that one of the things that you talk about how some media would maybe get the quote, sometimes the boilerplate quote from administrators, and sometimes with media, with general media too, like you get the quote from the politician or the
Mhm.
businessman, but what makes it, investigative journalism, what
Sure.
gives it this heft is you take that quote, but then you look into it too, and you
Mhm.
guys do that.
Yeah, and oftentimes you find that what you get from a brief interaction in an interview doesn't really match what years of context will have to say. So we try to do our best to include context in our stories, right? That
So important.
what's said in this one moment by an elected official, an administrator, whoever it is, does not exist just in that moment. It exists in relationship to the things that they've said before, the things that they've done before. And I think a great example of this on a very current topic, our college president, David Whitman, recently had a meeting with Students for Justice in Palestine, and I sat in on that meeting. And one of the things that Students for Justice in Palestine on our campus wants right now is for him to make a statement calling for a ceasefire in Gaza, an immediate ceasefire, and end to U.S. aid as well. And he kind of, in that meeting, which I was able to sit on, he said, "Oh, well, I don't want to make a political statement. If I were to redo my time as a college president, I wouldn't make statements." But when you look into the statements he has made in the past, he's commented on a range of things from police brutality to
Really?
Russia's invasion of Ukraine, to probably most notably, he was the only college president to sign on to a call for the U.S. State Department to determine what was happening in Myanmar, a genocide in 2020, right? So
Wow.
there's
Yeah.
if you don't
So
look
he
at that
has
context,
spoken out before about
right?
things. Yeah.
Right. So now you can see more clearly, like, oh, this is a position that is only recently really coming to be, and it's specifically on this issue that he doesn't want to comment on, which kind of adds that he didn't say
It makes
I
you
oppose
wonder.
this, but
As
right.
a reporter, you kind of wonder.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what do you think what do you think accounts for that contradiction?
Sure. On this specific issue, I think, frankly, it's the climate in higher education right now. The difference between how a lot of students feel and how a lot of alumni feel.
Mm-hmm. How do students feel? I think for the listeners here, I think it's interesting to tell people. We're seeing in the news right now.
Sure.
On the day we record this, it's one of the top stories in the news, and we're seeing crackdowns on campuses. We're seeing a lot of fervent, strong emotions on both sides. And I'm wondering, to put it into context for our listeners and the people who watch us on YouTube, what is this issue all about?
Sure. Big question.
That's the long one.
So, in brief, since October 7th, when Hamas attacked Israel, Israel has been waging a very strong campaign against Hamas, doing lots of bombing, lots of troops moving in. There's over 30,000, I think we're somewhere like 34,000 Palestinians dead now, several tens of thousands more displaced, and injured, or millions displaced, tens of thousands more injured. And a lot of Israeli government leaders have made statements to the effect that they do want to carry out conflict against the civilian population as well. And we see increasing evidence, whether it be the World Central Kitchen killings a few weeks ago, or more recent reports of mass graves that included women and children, stripped of clothing, arms tied behind the back, that Israel really is going after civilians as well as Hamas fighters. So a lot of students are reacting to that with an understanding of our institutions may have something to do with this, right?
And how so?
Sure. So through their institutional endowments is one way, right? So at Hamilton College, for example, we have an endowment that's about $1.4 billion, which is a lot.
That's a lot of money, right?
So one thing that I know advocates on our campus are asking, and at many other campuses are asking as well, are any of those companies defense contractors who are making the bombs and planes and other weapons of war that are carrying this out? Are any of these companies invested in Israel, where the source of a lot of this violence is coming from?
Yeah.
And even if it's a small percentage, that's still a lot of impact. So previously there were divestment from fossil fuel advocacy on campus, and I was
now, was
part
it
of that.
successful?
No, unfortunately, although elsewhere it has been.
Yeah, I was gonna say, right.
But one of the college's defenses is like, oh, only 2% of the endowment is in fossil fuels. Well, 2% of $1.4 billion.
It's quite a lot,
It's
right?
about $28 million, right?
Right,
That's a lot
right.
of money for a lot of fossil fuels. That's
Yeah.
a major impact. So we want to know how much of this exposure is to what's going on in Israel and Palestine, and for these institutions to take a stand on the basis that this is a humanitarian issue.
Right.
That there are universities as well being destroyed in Gaza. This is,
True,
many are saying,
yeah.
scholasticide.
Uh-huh.
And there's a kind of a impulse to reflect, like, what is our role, even if we're not the U.S. government,
Right.
in doing this? And not to mention, Hamilton, because of the size of its endowment, is one of a very small number of colleges and universities that actually pays taxes to the federal
Oh, I didn't
government.
realize that.
Yes, because of how large our endowment is
Wow.
per student. I think the cutoff is about $500,000 per student. To
So they
give
do
it a
have
sense.
a lot of money.
Yeah.
So like if a place like Hamilton were to pull $28 million from the company, it would send a message to the company to clean up their act.
Right, exactly,
Yeah.
and that's generally the logic of divestment, that you're removing the capital that is enabling them to do their business, and now it doesn't matter what their views are, that they have to follow the money because they have a fiduciary responsibility to do so.
So what was the result of the meeting? Is the president going to issue a statement or
No,
just,
he declined to issue a statement in favor of ceasefire, and that's kind of where we stand now. I am anticipating, though, that before the end of the semester there are going to be more instances of pro-Palestinian advocacy on campus.
What instances have there been? Have you
Sure.
have you had protests or sit-ins or demonstrations or?
I would say, compared to a lot of other institutions we're seeing in national media, it's been a little bit tamer at
I was going to
Hamilton.
say, right.
But there's been a lot of educational events, especially last semester. I remember attending a teach-in that was hosted by a coalition of student organizations that had something like at least 100 students attend.
What was that like? I've never been to one, but I've read about them in the 60s, and I'm curious.
Sure, they vary a lot. I think this one, at least, it was in one of our classrooms, larger classrooms, where there are a lot of seats.
Uh-huh.
People, there was overflowed with space. And then we had a couple of panelists up at the front who spoke about their expertise. One was a professor of history who has some expertise in the history of this region. And then another professor who has had deep relationships in Palestine and has visited and has worked in advocacy on that.
So people who know what they're talking about
Sure.
will just have, it doesn't really count as a class, but they'll have like a
Right.
presentation that you can go to, and people that want to learn more about it and learn about from people who know what they're talking about can, one thing that always strikes me about this, and that I'm not as informed about this as I should be, but one of the things that I've noticed that gives me pause is it seems like the kind of people that are like pro-Israel, rah, 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 are sort of like the most extreme right-wing conservatives that don't have a track record of caring about human rights or about, I've even seen homophobic politicians try to argue that gay people should support their side and the Israel side because of the way that Hamas would treat people who are gay. But the people who are like trying to use us as trying to like influence
Right.
us, they couldn't care less about us. So it's like, it seems like there's this odd push by the right wing to be like, to escalate and make it worse and fight hard, more and more and more. Why is that?
Sure. So the far right, for a very long time in the U.S., has tried to delegitimize higher education in a number of ways. One of them being, those liberal college students. And this goes back all the way, something like the 60s. But there's been a very intentional kind of connection between that and also the further diversification of higher education, the expansion of opportunity. It's no longer something that is just for wealthy white men, like it was, 100 years ago.
Oh, I see.
Um,
Right.
So, they are using this particular instance where they happen to have aligned interests with supporting Israel.
And what is that? Well, you know what? When we come back from the break,
Sure.
I will ask you what their interest is. I kind of picked a heavy, complicated topic right before the commercial, but this is only my third show, so I'm still in the hang of it here. But we have a lot to talk about. I'm with Eric Santomauro-Stenzel. He's the editor-in-chief of the Monitor at Hamilton, and you're in the hot seat on a Media Monday. We'll be right back.
Hi, this is Cassandra Harris-Lockwood, and this is The Hot Seat.
Hey everyone, welcome back to The Hot Seat. This is Media Monday. I'm Ron Klopfanstein, and I'm talking to Eric Santomauro-Stenzel. He is the editor-in-chief of the Monitor at Hamilton College. And before the break, we're talking a little bit about some of the protests on campus, and we're talking about like how that has affected the campus life at Hamilton. And you were talking a bit about how a group spoke to the president, urged him to make a statement in favor of the ceasefire, and that was unsuccessful.
Yes.
So we're wondering, like, why is it that people are so afraid to wade into this issue?
Yeah, there's a lot to that, and as I was saying, there's a difference between how the student body, I think, is broadly feeling, and how the much more influential alumni network
Donors.
is exactly feeling. For a long time now, even since October, there's been a kind of behind the scenes, not so public push for Hamilton to kind of stay the course and not wade in, and to whatever
Sort of
extent it
ignore
does.
it?
Yeah, to
Or just
either
stay out
ignore
of
it,
it,
or
at least,
to the
yeah.
extent that it does be engaged in a way that is favorable to Israel. Certainly not
Right.
condemn Israel in any way.
Yeah.
There's been a number of letters that were even sent to President David Whitman,
Really?
urging him to clamp down on the existence of Students for Justice in Palestine.
Wow.
So there's a real pressure for there to even be suppression on these campuses. And we're seeing that in places like Columbia, for example.
Right.
And we were also talking about kind of where is this right-wing pressure, why is this right-wing connection happening? And
what's their interest in Israel? You know, you see this right-wing pressure among people that really don't necessarily like diversity, and really probably don't believe that people who are the Jewish faith will go to heaven or whatever they think, you know. But all of a sudden, they're like the #1 fans. It's very suspicious.
And just as one example of that, Representative Brandon Williams, reporting from the Daily Sentinel, at a town hall recently, was critiquing schools along these lines of like having too much diversity, equity, inclusion. He uses the term cultural Marxism, and he specifically goes after the Frankfurt School, a group of philosophers, many of whom Jewish, who fled Germany because of the anti-Semitism there and because they were Marxists, right? And then shortly after, he goes on.
So
to
he
talk
like
about,
praises them.
Right, he goes after.
Oh, he goes after
These Jewish philosophers who are on the left, in
because
a
they
way
had
that,
escaped from Nazi Germany.
right, in this way that they're dangerous and so on and so forth. And then immediately after, he goes on to condemning the way that people are talking about Israel and Palestine on college campuses, calling out anti-Semitism. And
when he's anti-Semitic.
When he is saying something anti-Semitic, right? So there's this huge dissonance between the actual experiences of students on college campuses, and the vocalized kind of positions of a lot of Republicans in particular. So it's a difficult situation to navigate.
And there's a disconnect too, I think, between like what is happening there and what we're seeing like in the media here. You know, I think there's a lot of things that the people on the campuses, the students know about that the average person isn't aware is happening. Because news, I think commercial news tries to avoid unpleasantness. I guess the only way to say that. So.
Yeah, and we've seen publications on campus are usually offering the best coverage because they know their campus best. They are only concerned about serving their community, really. And you'll see a wide difference between the reporting that is going on, for example, in the Columbia Daily Spectator, and what the national media, who is kind of dropping in and doing like a couple hours there and saying, this is
trying
what
to
I saw.
figure out the lay of the land when they get there.
Exactly.
It's one thing to know your beat, like you guys do. How have you covered it in your paper?
Sure. We've done a number of things. The first thing we did is we published an open letter opinion piece from a coalition of student organizations in November that called for a ceasefire. It was kind of the first really open vocal imprint, or it was online at the time, call for that type of thing on our campus, because there were some very early pressures to kind of, let's not talk about this.
Really?
And there were some folks who kind of set the narrative like, you got to support Israel early on. And given the climate at the time, and still now,
Yeah.
people are afraid. Students are being targeted at other campuses. They don't want to see this happen here. So we published that letter calling for a ceasefire. We received some criticism from some alumni. We decided to publish one letter to the editor criticizing our decision to publish it, as well as the letter, and we responded with some.
What did the letter to the editor say? What was their actually like? What was their actual comment about what you wrote? Like, what was their complaint about this?
Their main complaint was that
Because the ceasefire seems like the kind of thing where it'd be hard to take a stand against a ceasefire. You know, I mean, it's like you're almost saying like I'm against peace. So
yes, the argument that this author made, first they say that they're disappointed in these students for sending out this letter, but they really kind of focus on the impact on Israel, Hamas's October 7th attack, and they say most outrageous. This individual said most outrageous is that the writers drew a slanderous parallel between support for Zionism and support from Hamas. Zionism is the movement that originally called for establishing a modern nation for the Jewish people in their ancestral homeland, and now refers to support for the continued existence of Israel. So the original letter that went out didn't call for an end to the state of Israel. It just made a pretty factual statement, in my view, that not all Jewish people are Zionists.
and not all Jewish people agree with what they're doing
Right.
over there. It's like
Exactly.
yeah.
And not all Arab or Muslim students support Hamas. Just a very basic thing. And I think that what he took issue with there was the kind of comparison, or the appearance of them being on equal footing.
Yeah, I mean, what do you say to that? You know, sometimes the good guys do bad things too, and sometimes, you know, that's it's. I mean, as a reporter, you have to report what happened, and as someone who is ethical, a student, you know, if you're leading a student group, you have to go with what the reality is. Not really who has the more money to spend on the college, you know. Now, among the older donors, the rich people, you know, they tend to be on the more the conservative
Sure.
side. But among the student body, like, what kind of response did your letter get from just your classmates or the population, the community on campus?
Sure. We saw a lot of positive response. There were a few negative comments on the Instagram to going up, which is their right to say.
Right.
But broadly speaking, in the student body, I would say the sentiment from the conversations I'm having, the reactions that we're getting on Instagram posts, how widely spread they're getting, it's generally positive. I think the broad sympathy of the student body, as we've seen at many other colleges, is that Israel is, going
too
far,
with
far
it.
too far,
Yeah.
and needs to stop. The U.S. is supporting it, and they don't like seeing these images of, killed or maimed civilians across their feeds all the time, and increasingly credible allegations of war crimes.
And it's really not helping the image of the Israelis, of Jewish people, to be associated with the brutality that we're seeing.
Right, and I think this is
women
also,
and children and civilians, and
right, and I think this is part of the reaction that we've also seen among some, is to try and equate Jewishness or Judaism
Right.
with support for the actions of a particular political actor, right? But having spoken with a number of anti-Zionist Jewish students on campus, and anti-Zionist Jewish people in general, this is not a universal view. They are not the same thing. And I can understand certainly a level of fear that does exist around a time where, that association is being made, both by avowed anti-Semites and people who claim to have the best interests of Jewish people in mind.
True.
So, I think the conversation, often as reported in the media, positions, people who are supportive of Israel as Jewish, right? But that's not the salient thing. What's salient is the politics that those individuals hold, the choices that they are making, right? So, as I've reported, for example, on how this discussion has been going, I'm careful to say Zionists are saying X rather than Jewish people are saying
Right.
X.
It's just like I never supported Trump. You know,
Right.
I wouldn't want to be held responsible or have what he does or says represent me in any way. So
Right.
it makes sense. So, what are some of the other topics you've written about that are like controversial or things where it really you had to use your skills to dig and develop and to add the context so people understand? What are some of the stories you're most proud of?
Yeah, I would say the series of stories I did on the firing of the college chaplain this past summer into the
Yes.
fall really brought the campus into the most uproar that I have seen.
And it got a lot of attention outside the campus too,
Exactly.
which is impressive for your work. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, it got different nonprofit leaders involved locally.
Right.
It got the Presbytery of Utica involved. And I think one of the things that really stood out to me is how clear it was that in making the decision to fire this chaplain, Hamilton really wasn't conscious of the relationships he held off campus, that he was such a centerpiece and cornerstone of the relationship between Hamilton
The
College
larger
and
community.
Mohawk Valley community,
Yeah.
which I think gets into some broader issues that I've seen and observed at Hamilton is there's a lot of folks who are kind of content to stay on the hill
Like
under their pile
insular.
of money, right? And not really engage with the community. And here we have somebody who, to many, invoked the word community more so than anyone else,
Right.
and also engaged in those community relationships. And the college
Yeah.
kind of gets rid of him in a way that many in the community saw
Now,
as
why
unceremonious.
did they? Did you ever get to the bottom of that? Do we ever know why?
So the best explanation I think I can offer is that the college felt that he wasn't meeting administrative expectations and certain administrative tasks, record keeping, strategic planning, stuff like that, and wanted to go, I think, in a more administrative, kind of
So it's
philosophy.
kind of like came down to meetings and committees and paperwork kind
Stuff
of stuff.
like that, yeah. And that's obviously not the full story. There was a
Right,
lot to
right.
it, but I think the broad community, their experience of working with him was almost unanimously positive,
It was, yeah.
and wanted to see him there. Felt that he had a positive impact there, and I think part of the broadness of the support that he had on campus is the reason why I was able to network and source my way throughout administration to get the
Right.
full details of what actually happened here and the way it went down.
What did he have to say about it?
He is a very gracious person, and he was clearly upset and shocked, I think.
Yeah.
But also very, very appreciative.
It
I
was a
think.
total surprise to him, wasn't it? That's the impression I
There
got.
was some lead up. There was a performance improvement plan
Okay.
that was put in place earlier in the
Like
year.
a shot
but
across the bow.
yeah, and then he got taken off the performance improvement plan. The performance improvement plan ended, I should say.
Yeah.
And then several months later, at the end of the spring 2023 semester, he got called into a meeting where he was fired on the spot.
Wow. So he had no tenure. There's no tenure for this.
No,
kind of
as
position.
staff members do not have tenure.
Has anything come out? I mean, has there been any progress made in his, or is he just gone? Or
So he, after a lot of pressure over the first 2/3, I would say, of the fall semester, the administration made a concession to hire him as a lecturer, which
Okay.
is a smaller position.
Yeah.
He teaches 1 or 2 courses a year now.
like an
he's-
adjunct?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. So that's kind of where he's situated now, and after that point, a lot of the energy, I think, and the pressure kind of dissipated.
Okay. So is he going to continue on in that role, or is it just?
To my understanding, the contract is for 3 years.
Oh, good. So it's not they're just like trying to distract people for a while and quietly get rid of him in the summertime, or well, you hope not.
Yeah.
Right. So we've also covered some stories together. We have a call right now from Ravenswood Comics for
Right.
Free Comic Book Day. We're going to go to commercial. We'll take the call, then we'll talk more about some of your work. You're in the hot seat on a Media Monday.
Yep, just one moment.
This is Cassandra Harris Lockwood, and this is the Hot Seat.
Welcome back to the hot seat. This is a Media Monday, and I'm Ron Klopfanstein. This Saturday is Free Comic Book Day, so we have a call-in from Al Durant. He owns Ravenswood Comics on Seneca Turnpike in New Hartford. So Al, tell us about Free Comic Book Day. What are some of the things you guys are doing down there at Ravenswood to celebrate this day?
Well, Free Comic Book Day is like the biggest day of the year for us. It's like Christmas time for comic book people, you know?
I love it.
From 10 o'clock in the morning till 4 o'clock in the afternoon, we have, I can't even tell you how many we have, but we have tons of comics that have been printed specifically for Free Comic Book Day this year that we just give away for free to people that come into the shop. And we have giveaways and deals and raffles and door prizes and all sorts of fun stuff going on.
It sounds great, and it's for all ages too, because comic book fans are there's adult comic book fans, and everyone likes comic books.
We have books from for kids through teens to adults.
Wow, that's amazing.
Books for everybody.
So right now, what are some of the what are some of the hot comic books now? Are they the things that they make the movies out of, the Marvel characters, or other stuff? Or
The movies certainly help push the comics. When you always have your blue chip standbys like Spider-Man and Batman are always going to be good sellers.
classics.
And then there's all sorts of new independent stuff that's coming out, like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles are out in the new anthology book that just hit last week, and there's some really great stuff from. I always tell people if there's whatever you like to watch on TV or read in a book or a magazine, we can find a comic that's going to match up to it.
Awesome. Well, that sounds like a good selling point. There's so many, there's the comic book field has such a variety that people don't always realize. And you probably have some manga too, right?
Yep, we do have some manga. There's even a couple manga-esque books that we're going to be giving away for Free Comic Book Day.
Wow.
We came out with a Popeye comic that's drawn like a monster.
Oh my gosh, I remember him. So what else do you do there? I know that you have, like, people can come there to play games, card games, Magic the Gathering type things.
Of course, comics is our bread and butter, but we also do Magic, Pokemon, and there's a new collectible card game called Lorcana, which is based around all the Disney characters.
Great.
So on most Friday nights we're doing Magic the Gathering, Friday night Magic. Then on Saturday we do our Lorcana play, and Pokemon's available all the time. It's a lot of fun if you're into those card games.
Yeah, well, that sounds great. Like, you're building a whole community, around the medium of comics. I think that's fantastic.
Yeah, that's what it's about. We're trying to get people, you get people in the store and you build a rapport with them, and if you get young kids in, and it's about reading, and then the older you get, it's kind of about hanging out with your friends and comic shows.
Well, that sounds great. I'm going to tell my 8th grade students, the ELA students, to stop down there and get a free comic, and maybe I'll stop down and pick some up for them. I think it's such a great way to read. Oh, that would be awesome. Thank you. I'm going to tell them tomorrow that next week I'm going to come in there with some free comic books for them. So thank you, Al. So Free Comic Book Day, it's once a year, and it happens to be this Saturday.
It's the first Saturday in May.
Great.
This happens to fall on May the 4th.
Oh, so like the 4th be... Yeah, that's Star Wars thing, right? Yeah, so may the 4th be with you, so, right. So Free Comic Book Day, the best place to celebrate that around here is at Ravenswood Comics on Seneca Turnpike. Thank you, Al, for talking to us. We will have to keep in touch so I can let people know all about the stuff you're doing there.
Anytime, Ron. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye. So, Eric, do you ever read comic books?
No, unfortunately.
No?
I'm much more of a online media.
I did when I was a little kid. I used to like Richie Rich. I used to be obsessed with that Richie Rich stuff, you know. That's before I knew how, you know, that's back when rich people weren't quite so bad. You know, you wouldn't really have that nowadays in the era of Jeff Bezos and, you know, Elon Musk.
Yeah.
Rich people don't appeal to me anymore, you know, especially rich entitled little snotty people. You know? So speaking of which, we've both written about some of the same people at times. We both wrote stories about the hate group Moms for Liberty. Now, in my case, I was personally, you know, targeted, stalked, attacked by them. You weren't attacked personally. I don't believe so, but you know, you recognize it as an important topic that people had to know more about. So maybe you could tell us a little bit about
Sure. The Moms for Liberty Oneida County first hit my radar when I saw that they would be having a 1-year anniversary celebration at the Alexander Hamilton Institute for the Study of Western Civilization in Clinton. It's a nice yellow house that they bought a number of years ago. And they've actually been hosting Moms for Liberty Oneida County for the full year. That's where they've been having their meetings. This celebration was going to have Mike Fellows, who ran for, or is running for office, and as people have probably heard, made some interesting comments.
Yeah. Will Fiacco, who actually, I believe,
well, yeah,
called for us to be exterminated, pretty much. I've seen some. I blocked him, but people sent me some of the things he's posted on social media about what he wants to do to get rid of LGBT people. Terrifying, you know.
Exactly, and then Dr. Mary Graybar, who's a resident fellow there as well.
Now, what is a resident? What does that mean?
To my understanding, the resident fellows at AHI are academics, I put in quotes,
Or they call themselves
that, who study different subjects under the auspices of AHI.
With a real political bent.
Yes, it's a very right-wing organization, but the way that they kind of try and launder their image is through their proximity to Hamilton College, naming themselves the Alexander Hamilton Institute. Even though they have no formal association,
the confusion makes people think, oh, they must be part of it.
Exactly. And, you know, that isn't without cause either. It was originally founded, or was going to be founded on Hamilton's campus as the Alexander Hamilton Center.
Wow.
But after a lot of faculty kind of got wise to their more right-wing political inclinations, there was some opposition that this wouldn't really be a viewpoint-neutral academic setting. So the college pulled out of its agreement to host the center on campus. They lost out on a lot of millions of dollars that would have funded it. And then AHI made a big stink in national media about it and went down the hill and founded their organization there with some of the professors who had been working on it.
In your newspaper, some of the reporters for your paper have uncovered some like disturbing things about their funding and who funds them, and the Koch brothers who have done a lot to damage democracy in the U.S. are big funders, it seems.
Yes.
Which is kind of scary.
Hundreds of thousands of dollars from the Koch Foundation, one of the Koch Foundations, which one I'm forgetting the name of right now, as well as a lot of these other philanthropic, in quotes again,
kind of
organizations.
Ultra-conservative.
And that's how they get all this money. Like, they're not really generating, to my understanding, much revenue from like their services. It's donors coming in and saying, we want to invest in this type of think tank to produce these ideas, produce events, proliferate them throughout the community.
And you can kind of see the results that they do by supporting groups like Moms for Liberty that attack teachers who are gay, attack transgender people, attack, you know, people who believe in, well, actually, you know, they want to get black issues out of school and burn the books, and you know, there's so much that they want to do, and you can kind of see like how those foot soldiers who are doing this harm are carrying out the wishes of the super rich who have a bigger agenda.
And not all of the people who are participating are really aware of that because of these levels of laundering. But we sent a reporter in there when they had this 1-year anniversary event to see, you know, what's going on. What are they talking about?
What was it like for that reporter?
they're anonymous. Is what I'll say.
Good thing.
It was a strange experience. I remember them kind of telling me that like this is like, first of all, it took a while for them to get started.
Yeah.
They delayed quite a bit. But also very much an echo chamber, not really thinking about like other ideas that might counter theirs, so except beyond kind of deriding them.
Right.
And this report also found kind of a list of some of the books that they wanted to ban and which schools they're in the local area that they had laid out for people to see.
Yeah.
And it was definitely.
And some of the teachers they wanted to ban too, unfortunately. Yes.
Really?
Wow.
Wow.
Well, I mean, I have to.
Oh yes. Well, yes.
Yeah, right.
And it's one of their notes. One of their notes that we were able to obtain, like from one of the meetings, kind of talked about how they've been in conversation with at least one superintendent about like a teacher who made some type of comments. We don't know, how reliable that claim is or what exactly it is, but it this is something that sparks concern for a lot of people. Moms for Liberty kind of has this role. It's
scary to be targeted
legitimacy.
like that. I wasn't even aware of them until people were telling me there's this lady who's like trashing, saying terrible stuff about you. It's like, at first I was like, I don't want to know, because there's always haters and trolls and there's all that kind of stuff, But then eventually I had to know because it became, the drumbeat was bigger and bigger, and it really kept up kind of until I fought back by going public with like telling people this hate group is attacking me, and also by going to the rally that you went to as well.
Yes.
So let's talk about that a little bit. You covered the rally.
Yes, there were a fair number of for a Clinton event, the protest. There were a fair number of people there.
Yeah.
Maybe like I want to say like 30 or something.
Yeah, it seemed like a lot. We were all in the gazebo, and it was
a lot of Clinton residents, including people who I understand are relatively influential in the Clinton community.
Yeah.
Saying this doesn't represent the values of Clinton. That we do accept LGBTQ plus individuals in schools. That we do want material that addresses the United States' history and so on.
Right.
And
it's such an academic culture in Clinton. It seems like it's so at odds with like what they wanted to do, which is to like shut down thought, shut down discussion, exclude. It is odd that it's there, but of course, I suppose the Hamilton Institute is why they're focused there. So.
Yeah, and AHI has a history of facilitating this type of kind of harassment on campus as well, or at least offering platforms for people to do that, bringing it to national right-wing outrage kind of outlets like the College Fix, Daily Caller, Campus Reform, that type of thing, where at times it could be a professor who is usually a black or brown woman professor, is teaching some class or offering some type of event on campus, academic in nature, that AHI or their associates kind of perceive to be like radical left or whatever, and then they send it to these, or I believe they send it out to these outlets, and then you get a lot of attention, which then often what follows is some form of targeted harassment.
You're right, and then the targeted harassment. That's actually what they did to me. Yeah,
from individuals who aren't associated with them directly.
Who have
so
no idea who they're
liability.
like going after. They just hear this bad stuff about someone, and
exactly, and it's
like a machine
for a long time.
Yeah,
and what kind of was successful in getting this group to be a less present part of our community was to explicitly delegitimize it, and I think that came in part through monitor coverage, but really through the students, faculty, and staff who organized very public events on campus. And different like informational material.
I think that really helped a lot too. At least for me, it seems like they had backed off, after that. And I have to admit, I was afraid to participate because, that level of hate, direct, and that personal kind of like stalking-ish, stalkerish hate is really can be scary. Even though you want to be brave and do the right thing, and I think I eventually did. I believe I wrote about it how. A few years earlier, we had a problem in my town with the KKK, and I had to organize a candlelight vigil to say not in my town, and so I kind of approached it like that too. I just have to, I have to stand up and we had to stand up as a community. And do you think that seemed to help? Because it seems like they've gone a little bit more quiet since then.
I think it did because when your whole strategy is to appear academic, rigorous, nonpartisan, and you're very publicly called out for the ways that you're not. And in fact, in many ways, the inverse of what you claim to be. What's your game now, right? You can't continue doing what you've been doing, and I think it became, to a certain extent, kind of socially toxic to be associated with it. So. Not in any type of like targeting way, but in like the average person's understanding who doesn't know too much.
They were exposed for what they were.
Right. The average person is like, AHI, that. Oh, you mean like that racist place down the hill, right? And that's it, right? And it's
for Monster of Liberty. That's the Burmers.
Exactly.
They're the ones going after my favorite teacher. It's like that kind of. Yeah, I think one of their tactics too is they think people. When you're first targeted by something like this, and I've had stalkers before too. Like, you first feel like you're the only one, and then like you don't know if you should say something, and it kind of like that fear is what they hope for because it isolates you. But then once you turn it around and say, hey, this is happening to me, and there's going to be this rally to oppose this, to stand up for freedom, I think it makes me feel better. It made me feel better as a target that I was like fighting back.
Exactly, and that's the type of thing I've seen.
Were you ever targeted by any of these groups or feedback?
I wouldn't say.
I believe
targeted.
on Twitter.
I've got into arguments.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, I got into a few arguments with Dr. Mary Graybar on Twitter, and I've followed her tweets as well. But I am lucky in that I've never really had to face that kind of direct targeting where I felt unsafe.
Right.
There is an anonymous message app that is used on Hamilton's campus, which folks might be familiar with. Yik Yak. This is something called Yodel.
Okay.
Where there was time where folks that I suspect to be associated with them were really aggressively kind of going on there to spread kind of rumors about me, right?
That's what they do, is they spread rumors and lies and stuff.
Right.
It's awful. And it's so hard to like fight back against something that's not true. And they know that,
Exactly. And when these claims oftentimes are coming from places that you can't really source.
Right,
and
you don't know who said it and who. Right.
And what I would like to see is a more intentional response from college leaders when this type of thing happens, right? Like, what this ultimately is an assault on academic freedom.
Absolutely.
Right? If you can't study subjects like race and gender and sexuality,
and if you can't have teachers that are like diverse, I mean,
you've essentially kind of surrendered a little bit, right? Even if the institution isn't actively aiding and abetting, if it isn't actively defending, you still have an environment in which it is unsafe to teach about these controversial topics.
Absolutely.
And Hamilton's kind of response to AHI for a long time has been, we're not officially associated with them, we're not going to say anything about them. And meanwhile, where our college president is in national media talking about assaults on academic freedom in states like Florida.
And it's happening right down the hill.
It's happening right down the hill, and the people who need your support now, who are teaching the types of things that you're defending in national media, are getting no kind of public support from you here. So
and
the community has to come out and do it.
It goes beyond what they teach, too. It's just who they are. Like in my case, it's just who I am, and it's, And
to reflect on that, right? I think part of the reason why I haven't been targeted to the extent that other people have is that I'm a cisgender, heterosexual, white man. Right. And even then, I've probably been the most vocal student on campus about this subject, right? And like that offers a certain level of protection to have those identities.
True, right. And like if you were gay, they'd see you as the easy target, like they do with me, Or even if you were transgender, they'd see you as the easiest target of all. They would, definitely get draw blood for that, So you're doing such great work with the monitor. Can you tell us one more time, Eric Santomauro-Stenzel? You're the editor-in-chief. Can you tell us one more time where we can read your work?
Sure. It is HamiltonMonitor.com. HamiltonMonitor.com.
And do you have anything else you're going to write before you graduate?
Too much.
I know the feeling.
Working on my senior thesis, but also going to be continuing covering pro-Palestinian advocacy on campus. And maybe if I can work it in before I graduate, some stuff off campus as well.
Great. Well, once you graduate, go to Columbia. I hope that you stay in touch with us, with
Sure.
me. Love to have you on the show, even if you have to call in. If you're down in New York, you'll be doing exciting stuff down where things are really happening. So I can't wait to read the rest of your work. You're going to have a great future, and you're really a great journalist. And I say that there aren't a lot of people out there who do the kind of investigative journalism that you do. And I admire that. So
Thank you.
thank you for being here. It's great to have you on the show. Eric Santomauro-Stenzel, Editor-in-Chief of the Hamilton Monitor. I'm Ron Klopfanstein. This has been the Hot Seat Media Monday. And now we're going to check in with Jay Easy for the Easy Ride Home. Jay Easy, it's 6 o'clock. You ready for the Easy Ride Home? He's nodding his head. I think he needs a microphone. We need to get a mic over for him. I always forget.
I'll get this.
Oh, he's going to take mine. All right. Here we go.